Okay, so we're ready to start mixing our ingredients to make what we call a poolish. So we're going to add in our 2 teaspoons of yeast. They go in. We're going to add in our 2 teaspoons of sugar, and that feeds the yeast. We're not going to add our salt in until later. And I'm going to take about half of my flour, just roughly half the flour, and I'm just going to sprinkle it in. And then I'm going to take my water and I'm going to add in about half my water. There we go. And this is lovely warm water. This is just tap water, so this is nice warm tap water. Then I'm going to get a whisk, or you can use a fork, it doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to mix that together. And then I'll add in the rest of that lovely warm water. Like so. And I'm going to mix that together. Try and get out all the lumps of flour. That's nice and smooth. Now we're going to leave this. Now ideally we'd leave this for about half an hour, but 15 minutes will be enough, and we'll come back in 15 minutes and have a look at this poolish. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes, so let's have a look at the poolish and see how it's doing. So you can see it's got nice bubbles and raised bits in it. That means our yeast has started to work and we've got lots of lovely air into our dough. So next I'm going to add in the rest of my flour. So I'm just going to sprinkle that in from a height just so we get some more air in, like so. I'm going to add in the 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So it's just a little bit of salt, not a lot. And I'm going to add in my olive oil, and I put this in just for flavour and to help bind the dough. We put that in. And I'm just going to stir that all together with my spatula and start bringing it together. Now, this is the bit that varies. Some people end up with a stickier dough. It depends how much water you've used. So mine's looking a bit sticky. So all I'm going to do is just going to get my little bit of extra flour that we had ready and sprinkle in a little bit at a time. There, it didn't take much, and it's already starting to come together into a more solid dough. A wee bit more flour. A bit more, we're nearly there. I'm going to get my hands in now and see how it feels. Yes, it's lovely and light, but it's still a little bit sticky. So I'm just going to sprinkle a bit more flour. A little bit more. So basically, when it stops sticking to your hands like that and starts to form a nice ball of dough. I'm not kneading this. If you have a look, all I'm doing is very lightly mixing in the last of that flour with my fingers, because I want to keep the air in, because that's what's going to give me the fluffiest flatbreads. So this is coming together. See the way it's in a nice ball now? It's all together, so that's ready for me to bring out onto my surface, which I'm just going to flour. Okay, I've got a bit in my fingers that I can put back in. Now, what I've ended up with is a really light dough. Just going to knead it a little bit. can add a wee pinch of flour if you think it's sticky. What I'm doing is I'm just taking from the outside and I'm putting it into the middle. And that is folding lots more air in. So I'm not bashing it like I would if I was making a loaf, because I want our flatbreads to be very light and fluffy, and then if we're lucky when we cook them in the pan they will really puff up. Okay, so there's my dough. It's a nice soft pillowy dough. If you've got time, leave it for 15 minutes. If you're really hungry and you haven't got time, we can just cut it straight away. Okay, so we've left our dough for 15 minutes and it's risen beautifully and it's still all light and fluffy, so I'm not going to handle it too much because I don't want to lose the air in my flatbread. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it into 6 little balls, and this is a dough cutter, but you can just use a big wide bladed knife. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to cut each one of those into 3, like so. So this is going to make 6 flatbreads. So without handling it too much, just sort of tucking it under into a little ball. Make sure it's on a nice bed of flour, and I'm going to get my rolling pin. So first of all I'm going to flour the rolling pin because I don't want my nice soft dough to stick. And all I'm going to do is just very gently, not pushing hard at all, very, very gently, just widen it out into the shape of the flatbread that we all know. These don't have to be a perfect circle. In fact, I think the quirkier they are, the better. Okay, that's our first stage. So we can do the next one while we cook this one. Okay, so I've heated up my pan to around, we've got it at about 7. So it's nice and hot, but not so hot that it's going to burn them. I've also got a bowl here ready to put my flatbreads into, and I've just put a tea cloth in it so that I can wrap them up and keep them nice and warm until we're ready to eat. That helps keep them nice and fluffy as well. Okay, so I'm going to take my first flatbread, and I've got no oil in my pan whatsoever, so you could use this, do this on a skillet if you have a skillet, or a non-stick frying pan's fine. And we're just going to leave it there. We'll keep an eye on it. And it should start to puff a little. So a bit like pancakes, the first one's always a bit mediocre. And then as the pan really warms up, the next ones are brilliant. Okay, so this is just after a minute, and you can see that it's starting to bubble up nicely and starting to puff. And we're getting a little bit of smoke coming around the sides. So we know this is almost ready to flip. Just going to give it another few seconds. So we want this dough to cook all the way through. So let's have a look, see if we can flip it now. So it's lovely on the other side. So now we've got to cook it on this other side for another few minutes. So here's our finished flatbread. So you should eat them straight out of the pan while they're nice and hot. You can use all sorts of fillings. We like to do a bit of a share board, so you could fill them with cucumber, tomato, carrot, lettuce, mayo. We've got some lovely falafel, some hummus. We've got some lovely toasted chickpeas. Those are just roasted off in a dry pan with some cumin and onion salt, and they are delicious for putting in a flatbread. And that is our finished flatbread.